This is a story I promised to never tell, but I have to share it now. For years, I told myself that it wasn't real, that it was just a paranoid delusion or a mental breakdown that I had during my youth. But now, after 2 decades of keeping it to myself, I am ready to reveal the truth. I have never experienced anything like it before, and I still can't fully explain what happened that day. And as time goes by, I fear that the horrors I witnessed will one day come to our world. When that day comes, God help us all. It all started on a Wednesday morning during my first year at a well-known UK university. I was a history student, and like most first-year students, I did my fair share of partying. I had been out late the previous night, so I slept in and was running late for my Ninium lecture. I quickly brushed my teeth, threw on some clothes, grabbed my rucksack, and sprinted out of my halls and across the street to the lecture hall. I was still half asleep and hungover, and I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. If I had been more alert, I might have realized that something was wrong before I reached the lecture theater, but instead, I ran straight into a trap. There was a moment when I felt that something was off. It was like a primal fear buried deep inside my subconscious, or perhaps my soul itself. I experienced a literal chill down my spine, freezing momentarily with my hand on the ice-cold door handle. It was like there was a voice screaming inside my head, telling me that I shouldn't go inside. I should have listened to my instincts, but I was young and foolish. I told myself that this was stupid and that I had nothing to fear. And so, I pushed the door open and entered the lecture theater, making a decision that I would regret for the rest of my life. At first glance, the interior of the lecture theater didn't look like anything out of the ordinary. Rows of seats were set up in an amphitheater style, facing down towards the podium where the lecturer stood over a projector screen showing a PowerPoint presentation. Rows of students sat in tight formation. Alls of students sat in tight formation, all sitting in total silence with their eyes facing front. It was eerie how quiet it was inside that theater. You could have heard a pin drop. This was my second indication that something was off about this classroom. Usually you could guarantee some chatter from the back seats, with somebody messing around or slacking off. But not with this class. They were the most well-behaved and focused students I'd ever encountered, and there were close to 100 students inside that lecture theater, and they were all dressed identically. Each and every one of them was dressed in a dark black uniform. Shirts and trousers for the boys, blouses and long skirts for the girls. Not only that, but they all had the same hair, the boys with short crew cuts and girls with their hair tied back in neat buns. None of the females wore makeup from what I could tell. Clearly, I was the last student to arrive for the lecture, and I felt very uncomfortable as I walked down the aisle in search of a seat. But no one turned to look at me or even to acknowledge my existence. They all kept their eyes on the front podium, their faces emotionless and devoid of expression. This was freaky enough, but then I saw the lecturer. On the surface, our teacher seemed quite normal, a middle-aged academic type dressed in a tweed suit and sporting a well-trimmed goatee beard. He wore reading glasses which he lowered ever so slightly. As he watched me approach, I had no doubt that this man would punish me for any perceived misstep. and punish me he did. The lecture itself was like no other I'd ever attended. The lecturer spoke in a monotone voice, the words flowing together into a jumbled mess. It was like he was speaking in tongues. And as the minutes ticked by, I felt increasingly uncomfortable. The silence of the other students was oppressive, and the atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. And then it happened. The lecturer suddenly stopped speaking and turned to me, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly fire. I tried to move, to run, but I was rooted to the spot. "You," he growled. "You don't belong here." Before I could answer, he lunged at me, his hands turning into claws and hurting me. I screamed, but the other students remained silent, their eyes fixed on the front of the room. The attack seemed to go on forever, the pain unbearable as the creature tore at my body. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The creature stood over me, its breath coming in ragged gasps. "You're lucky," it said. "I will let you live. For now." I lay there broken and bleeding while the creature melted and took the form of the lecturer again. The other students continued to stare blankly ahead as if nothing had happened. In the years that have passed since that terrible day, I have done my best to forget it. What happened, but it still haunts me, and I know that one day the horrors I witnessed will come to our world. I warn you now, dear reader, be on your guard. The world is a dangerous place, and there are things out there that we cannot comprehend. All we can do is prepare ourselves for the worst, and the worst and too is prepare ourselves for the worst and hope that we are strong enough to survive. I wanted to leave that lecture hall, to run away from whatever twisted experiment was going on there. But my feet refused to move, and I found myself sitting in a chair, numb and paralyzed with fear. The lecture continued, but I couldn't focus on anything the lecturer was saying. Instead, I felt like I was in a trance, as if the black uniforms and the emotionless faces of the other students had somehow hypnotized me. The lecturer's voice seemed to be coming from far away, distorted and sinister. It wasn't until he started showing images on the projector that I snapped out of my trance. The images were graphic and disturbing, showing scenes of torture and mutilation that made my stomach turn. I tried to cover my eyes, but my hands wouldn't move. I was trapped, forced to watch as the images continued to flash before me. The lecturer's voice grew louder and more intense as he started to talk about some kind of ritual sacrifice. He spoke of summoning ancient gods and offering human sacrifices to appease them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I wanted to scream, but my throat was too dry. Suddenly the lights went out and the room was plunged into darkness. I heard screams and cries of panic from the other students, but I was too paralyzed with fear to move. I felt like something was watching me. Something was watching me. Something malevolent and ancient. Then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I knew that I was not alone. I turned to see the lecturer, his face twisted into a demonic grin. He whispered something in a language I couldn't understand, and I felt a searing pain, in my chest. I woke up in a hospital bed, my chest bandaged and my mind reeling. The doctors told me that I had suffered a heart attack, but I knew that wasn't the whole truth. The experience had changed me in ways I couldn't fully understand. I became obsessed with the occult, studying ancient texts and practicing dark rituals in secret. And now, 20 years later, I fear that the horrors I witnessed in that lecture hall are coming back to haunt me. I have seen signs and portents of the ancient gods awakening, and I know that their return will bring only death and destruction. I have vowed to stop them, no matter the cost. But I fear that it may already be too late. The darkness is closing in, and I can hear the whispers of the ancient ones calling to me. I pray that I am strong enough to resist their pull, but deep down I know that I am not. And when they come for me, I will welcome their embrace, for I know that in death I will finally be free. If you like my story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video for more and similar stories.